Hi guys, so this is the overview for the ICD-10 CM manual. Like I said before, we don't have enough manuals to go around for the class, and I don't want to make you buy these expensive manuals. Each of these manuals is usually between 95 and 120 bucks a piece, depending on which type of the CM manual you buy. And I don't see making you go through that expense. So we're going to kind of do it this way. And I'm going to record this video and kind of show you what the manual looks like. So I explained to you the other day in class during the lecture that this manual is pretty thick. And so you can kind of see here just how thick this manual really is. I mean, it's a pretty substantial book. It's got some girth to it, if you can kind of see there. Let me do this way too. So you can kind of see how thick this is. Now this is only one brand of manual. I prefer when I teach my coding classes to use these Optum 360 manuals because I like that it is color coded. Each of the sections is color coded, as you can kind of see down here. And so that's why I like this Optum manual, but there are lots of different kinds of other ICD-10 CM manuals. So to kind of give you an overview of the ICD-10 CM manual, you will always want to use the most current manual. This manual actually expired about a month ago. It expired on September 30th, 2016. So there are updated manuals that will be coming out shortly. If they are not out already, I haven't gotten them from the publisher yet, so we're going to use this one for today. On the inside of the manual, you've got all of your basic kind of, what are the table of contents, prefaces, introductions, gives you the history of the ICD-10 CM codes, and then an overview of these conventions. And so if you were in a coding class, I would stress to you how important these conventions are to know. And if you ever decide to go in and learn coding a little bit more thoroughly, you'll want to pay attention to these conventions in much greater detail than I'm going to ask you to do for this 225 class. These conventions actually will indicate how you will use these codes all the way throughout the whole manual. And that will be the case for the majority of the coding manuals that you will use at any time. So, for example, it tells you like NOS stands for not otherwise specified. And so anytime you would see that throughout the manual, it could be interpreted as an unspecified code in a tabular list. Boldface are used for main terms, and then there are subterms underneath. Includes notes. There's information there about what main terms may include other subcategories. Inclusion terms, exclude notes, excludes one, excludes two, default codes. There's all kinds of stuff in here that if you coded on a more specific level, or you wanted to do this for a living, then you would want to make sure you pay attention to those conventions. So there are conventions at the beginning of the book, and then there are conventions at the beginning of each section. So I'm going to see if I can flip to a section here for you, and they give you the there are guidelines at the beginning of each section, and they tell you these guidelines and examples will be at the beginning of each section. And so this section, chapter 1, covers certain infectious and parasitic diseases. And so these first few pages of each chapter are going to give you all of the chapter-specific guidelines, and then they also give you some coding examples to kind of guide you as you go through the following pages for the chapter. And so that occurs in every chapter. They have chapter-specific guidelines with coding examples all the way through. Chapter-specific guidelines and coding examples, and then you start to get to the actual code sets. So the coding conventions live at the front of the coding manual. The coding specific guidelines will live at the beginning of each chapter, and you would want to go through all of those for each chapter prior to working through the code sets for that chapter. So now that you have kind of an overview, you can kind of see one more note about these guidelines and conventions. These are very, I mean, there's a lot of them. There's quite a few of them. This whole section from here so there's probably 20 pages of conventions. So that whole section there are 32 pages actually of guidelines and conventions that you would want to the conventions are before, and then the guidelines for coding and reporting that you would want to be aware of before you start coding records or anything. Okay, so to give you an idea of how to use this manual, I figured first we would go through the neoplasm table. I like to section out all of my coding manuals just so that it makes it easier for me to, and you can kind of see there how I have each of the code sets sectioned out by chapter so that after I look them up in the index, I can kind of flip to whatever tab it is that I need to flip to. I also have them sectioned out on top, so I have neoplasms marked out, drugs and chemicals table marked out, and then the V codes marked out because we use those quite a bit. So I figured we would work in the neoplasms to begin with and kind of work through some of those so I can show you how to look something up in the index first and then how to find them in the neoplasm table. So the first thing I want to look up for today is let's look up, I'm looking at another book over here so you can hear my voice kind of going in and out because I'm turning my face away from the microphone, so hang on. Let's look up a primary neoplasm of an ovary. Okay, so first thing you want to do is flip to the index pages, and they are always located at the front before all of the chapter pages. And so primary neoplasm of the ovary, you would want to look up neoplasm. Now you could look this up in the index but the index is going to tell you right away to go to the neoplasm table, which is where we're going to end up in just a second. I have to alphabetize in my head every time I go through the index. Neoplasia, neoplasm. See also. So I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm going to try to move this camera down a little bit for you. So I looked up neoplasm. Neoplasm would be my main term. That's the actual condition. Let me see if I can make this clearer for you. And so neoplasm says see also table of neoplasms. So that's what we're going to go. So I'm going to zoom this back out a little bit. So we're going to go to the neoplasms table, which I have handily marked right there. And this is what the neoplasm table looks like. And so you can kind of see, let me bring this up here for you. You can kind of see up along the top, you have this neoplasm table, okay? And on each page it has malignant primary, malignant secondary, cancer in situ, benign, uncertain, unspecified behavior. And then over here, malignant primary, secondary, cancer in situ, benign, uncertain, unspecified behavior. And so because these are different types of cancers, so it'll start with various types of cancer, and this is another column. So we're looking up the primary neoplasm of the ovary, okay? So once you get into the neoplasm table, you would want to look up ovary. So here we have A's, auditory auricle, here's C's, cartilage, J's, jejunum, LMNO. Okay, we're getting closer. So here's oral, We want to look up ovary. Okay. So I found ovary. Ovary is here. And we are looking up for a primary neoplasm of the ovary. I'm trying to adjust this for you really quick. Let me move this out, move this up. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. So we have ovary. Ovary is right here, and we're looking for primary neoplasm. So primary is here, malignant primary. Now, this tells us that the first three digits are going to be C56 point. And then if you look down at the and then has a check mark box. If you look down at the bottom here, it tells you, let me fix that for you, that the check mark would indicate that an additional character is required. Refer to the tabular list for character selection. Okay, so we know that C56 is where we need to go in the tabular list, okay? So what that means is I'm going to go C56, and I'm going to look over here on my edges for my C tab, which is right here. So C56 is going to fall in between C00 and D49. So I'm going to flip to this section. And then I'm going to look for C56. There's C44. I made you blurry again, sorry. Okay. C44, C55, C56. Okay. So here I have a malignant neoplasm of the ovary here. And it says use additional code to identify any functional activity. Now it doesn't, my question doesn't tell me if it's right ovary or left ovary. And so since I don't know, it would be an unspecified ovary. So my actual code would be C56.9, which would be the malignant primary neoplasm of an unspecified ovary. So that's how it goes. Okay, so the next one I want to look up is Wilms nephroblastoma, which is a specific type of kidney cancer. Wilms is the proper noun because Wilms is the guy who discovered this particular type of kidney cancer. So again, we would start in the index and look up Wilms. W's. And I found here Wilms tumor, tells me C64. So I would then probably go to C64, flip back here. Now you can go to the neoplasm table and try to look it up there, but it's also going to direct you to C64 as well. So let's go to the C section directly. C66, 64. Okay. C64. And can you see that okay? C64, there's a little red check box here that says requires a fourth digit. So C64 is malignant neoplasms of kidney except of the renal pelvis. Excludes malignant carcinoid tumor of the kidneys, malignant neoplasm of the renal calyces, and malignant neoplasms of the renal pelvis. So what we would look for is whether or not, in our problem, it tells us it's the right or left kidney. It does not. So our code would be C64.9, which is malignant neoplasm of unspecified kidney except for the renal pelvis. So what basically this code tells us here, all of this business here tells us, is that this patient has this Wilms nephroblastoma is a specific type of kidney cancer. It's malignant, and we don't know what kidney it is in, so that would be the unspecified kidney part. And we do know that it is not in the renal pelvis. So that's what this code tells us. Okay, one more. Let's do one more. Let's do carcinoma in situ of the bladder. So we're going to flip back to the index. And do carcinomas. And carcinomas, urinary bladder, where are you? Carcinoma in situ. So it says see also neoplasm table in situ by site. So we're going to do that. So we'll flip to the neoplasm table. I don't know if you can see that here, but it's carcinoma in situ, see neoplasm table in situ by site. So we're going to flip up here to the neoplasm table, and then we're going to find urinary bladder. Like I said, I always have to go through the alphabet. QRSTU. Okay, so let me make this a little closer for you here. So we have here neoplasm, bladder, okay, urinary system or bladder, see neoplasm, bladder, overlapping lesion sites. So let me go back here to bladder. I'm going to pause this for a second while I find it so I save you from watching me find this. Okay, so I found bladder. Bladder is here, urinary bladder, and my question was carcinoma in situ of the bladder. Okay, and so here we go. Bladder, urinary. To find out where the in situ one is, you want to come down from the cancer in situ up here, all the way down to bladder. And the code is going to be D, I don't know if you can see that or not, D09.0. And that's the cancer, following the cancer in situ down. So then we would go and verify that back in the tabular section. So D09.0. Flip to our D section back here. D09.0. And here we have, let me make that a little clearer for you. Here we have D09, which is carcinoma in situ of other unspecified sites. D09.0, carcinoma in situ of bladder. So that is, in fact, our code. It does tell us that it needs a fourth code. That 0.0 is the fourth code, the fourth digit, so we're good there. So D09.0 will be the carcinoma in situ of the bladder. All right, so that's kind of how to use the neoplasm table and how to look up codes within the manual. I'm going to pause this for a second, find another example, and show you, and then that will be that for the video, and then we'll work through some of them in class together. Okay, so I'll show you one more thing that does not involve the neoplasm table, how to look up one more code, and I just picked a random code that I found on an assignment that I gave another class, and the code was for transient global amnesia. So the first thing you're going to do is look that up in the index, and to save time on the video, I found that. And so you want to look up, whenever you're looking up things in the index, you want to look up the actual diagnosis. So in this case, the actual diagnosis would be amnesia, and transient and global would be descriptors for that actual diagnosis. So you would look up amnesia in the index to begin with. So we're going to look up amnesia, and I found amnesia here, and I see that transient global is G45.4. Okay, and so I'm going to flip back here to my sections, to my neuro sections, to my G tab. What was that? 45.4. Just to verify that and make sure that's actually correct. So G 44, 45. So let's check. My poor book has seen its better day. Okay. Sorry, I know I'm not very graceful with this camera. It kind of matches the rest of my personality. Oh, there we go. Okay, so G45 tells us that transient cerebral ischemic attacks and related syndromes. G45 requires a fourth digit. G45.4 has that fourth digit. That's transient global amnesia. And that does exclude amnesia that's not otherwise specified. That would be a different code. This was specified as transient global amnesia. If it was just amnesia, then the code would be R41.3. But since it's not, it's specified as transient global amnesia, then we're going to use the code G45.4. All right, so that's kind of a basic how to look a code up in the ICD-10 manual, how to use the neoplasm table. Let me try to think what else. I think that's kind of it for now. We'll work through some of these in class together too.